We'll get started. Hey, welcome everyone to our presentation. Today we're going to be talking about our experiences as students jumpstarting an OER awareness campaign at the University of Utah. We're hoping to share some insights from the student perspective. And if any of you guys have questions as we talk, just drop them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end.
Okay, so my name is Donna Ziegenfuss, and I'm a librarian in the Teaching, Research, and Outreach Unit of the Marriott Library at the University of Utah. I'm the College of Education Library Liaison and an adjunct faculty in Education Leadership and Policy Department. In our library, we do not have a dedicated librarian, but I do what I can to support faculty who are interested in using OERs and a statewide Pressbook pilot initiative, which we're running currently. Based on my OER and open pedagogy sabbatical research, which I did in fall 2023, I created an action plan to develop awareness around OERs across campus and support faculty projects. As an adjunct faculty member teaching a graduate course using OERs in my teaching for several years, I saw the benefit for my students both financially and academically. But on this campus, there is no support. So we are starting from ground zero this year. We hired 2 students who you see, who started the presentation, Elise and Emma, and they are going to help us jumpstart our OER efforts. Having student voices at the table in planning and student perspectives during the OER efforts have been an amazing experience for me and changed how I think about OER support and outreach. So this session today will spotlight the work they've done so far this year. I will hand it over to them to introduce themselves and to show you what they've been doing. So Elise and Emma, take it away.
Okay, to start off, just with introductions, as I was saying, my name is Elise LeMonnier. I'm a senior at the University of Utah. I study English and art history and a little bit of graphic design.
And my name is Emma. I'm also from Utah. I'm currently a freshman at the U studying business marketing. Okay, and as Donna was saying, the University of Utah and Utah as a whole doesn't really have any OER initiatives or support. And because of this, we didn't know anything about OERs when we first started at the library. So the first thing we wanted to do when we got hired was to sit down with Donna and make a few goals to direct the process through our first semester. So as students, we especially wanted to provide our perspective on the OER initiatives in Utah. And we hoped to spark a conversation among students and educators about the benefits of OER, master Pressbooks, and in doing so, create our own OER. We also planned to collaborate with different departments to create OERs through Pressbooks and Canvas, and collect qualitative and quantitative data about course materials from student perspective.
So our first step, as Emma was saying, was to learn about what OERs are. So one of the first projects we worked on was to create a playbook website that basically acted as a one-stop shop tutorial for open implementation. And it's a way to provide step-by-step instruction about OER for people on different levels of OER knowledge. It kind of meets people where they're at. If they don't know anything about OERs, they can start at the beginning, or they can just pick and choose topics that they want to learn more about. On this slide, we have a little concept map at the bottom that we used to game plan how we wanted the website to flow and to work in the user interface. And then on the top, I was able to use a little bit of my graphic design experience to design these little graphics that function as the navigation for the website. And then this is just a little run through of the playbook. We both agree that this was the perfect first project to work on because it pushed us to learn as much about OERs as possible so that we could help others do the same. A lot of research went into creating this into the playbook, and we are hoping that it will be used as a comprehensive guide on OERs at our campus and in our community. We explain Creative Commons licensing, different ways to access OERs, how to remix and adapt them, open pedagogy, and more. Right now, it's still in the pilot stage, but we're hoping to get it online soon, so keep an eye out.
Okay, so after we finished making the playbook, we really wanted to start learning about Pressbooks and kind of start creating our own OER because at this point we had a lot to say and we wanted to begin documenting our experience and compiling what we've learned into one place. So some of the chapters we really wanted to highlight were our top 10 tips for implementing OERs, specifically for people who've never used OERs before. And we drew a lot of this knowledge from what we learned creating the playbook. We also wanted to cover how OERs are not just about the money. We believe that students and educators can benefit from OERs in lots of different ways, not just saving money. We also wanted to highlight the inclusive access debate and kind of our perspective on that, what we would tell students, and how AI and OER go hand in hand. So we're still documenting our experience as we continue to learn about and work with OERs, but we plan to publish this book at the end of the school year when everything's just more rounded out.
So continuing the trend of everything kind of building off of each other, after we wrote our own press book, we began to collaborate with different people and departments around the university to produce more press books. We first worked with Donna to create 2 different press books. One was about quality course framework, and the other was about research in the library and strategies. And then after that, we were actually fortunate enough for the medical school to reach out to us, asking us to integrate all the information from one of their websites into a press book, ensuring that the information would still be available to the public after their site went offline. And they were super happy with how it turned out, and they appreciated the different resources provided by Pressbooks that a simple web page doesn't have, like H5P. And if you look here on the right, you'll see how the table of contents looks in Pressbooks from the website. Not only did we preserve their information, but we were also able to make it more accessible and interactive for those using it. And then after that, we worked with a business librarian who wanted to integrate a Canvas course into Pressbooks, focusing on H5P and automatic grading through Canvas. And throughout all of these collaborative projects, we have seen that despite the lack of open education support at our university, if people try open resources, they love them. And going forward, we definitely see the symbiosis between Pressbooks and Canvas as a good place to advocate for and spark excitement for open education, especially among educators at the U.
Awesome. So now that we felt confident working with Pressbooks and better understood the OER world, we decided we were ready to venture out and start OER initiatives at our university, which was daunting, but we decided to start anyways. And we knew that there were going to be a lot of politics around our OER advocacy, and we wanted to make sure we were aware of that. So our university owns the bookstore and is currently pushing inclusive access. So we decided to meet with the librarian who works closely with both of those kind of perspectives, and she was able to direct us on how we wanted to go about this process without offending anyone. This conversation helps us change our verbiage and rhetoric within our marketing strategies to kind of have our angle be more focused on the students rather than threatening the profit of the university-owned bookstore. Our main priority throughout this whole thing is to support students over anything else, and we didn't want to run into any unnecessary complications along the way. So here's an example of how we adapted our approach. Rather than promising free textbooks, we emphasized the support we could provide for students and the changes that could be made with student advocacy.
And then from there, we also met with the marketing department at our library and worked to develop a ton of different posters that engage different types of students. On this slide, we have 3 of our favorites that we put up around the library and around campus. And as Emma was saying, we didn't want to promise free textbooks because we kind of lack the support and resources to do so. So instead, we just wanted to create a conversation around textbook prices as a way to initiate open educational action. And besides that, another big goal of ours was to hear from students and gather data as a way to validate our goals and make an impact, showing that these issues go beyond the library. So as you can see, we put a little QR code on all of our posters, which took students to a 6-question poll called the Textbook Conversation that asked students about their experiences with course material and OER. In addition to just recording their responses, we also wanted to give them resources. So at the top of the form, we linked our library's interlibrary loan, a way for students to request the library to purchase their course materials for them. And we also linked our favorite OER repositories so that students could explore and find free resources tailored to their needs. We wanted to provide students with options now while we continue to chip away at implementing OERs in a more encompassing way at the U. We believe that any type of change at the university needs to start with students. So informing them of other more affordable options is a way to be advocates while collecting their voices and data.
Our priority of hearing student stories led us to hold a few tabling events where we focused on having open conversations with other students and telling them about our OER experience and kind of hearing their perspective. So from this, we managed to get 50 responses on our poll. And these are some of the QR codes we had up on our table. One was going out to the poll, one was going out to interlibrary loan, where they can suggest a purchase. And a lot of students actually commented on how they'd never heard of that resource before and were very excited to use it. And then the last QR code was going out to those OER repository libraries, kind of on this link tree here. And then we developed this flow chart titled The Pathway to Free Textbooks. And we made this because we know how confusing it can be to try and find accessible resources. And sometimes it feels easier to just accept the expensive options. So we wanted a very clear, easy to follow pathway for students to find options that worked for them. And we wanted to do the hard part for students. So all they had to do was look at it and figure out what worked best for them.
Okay, and now we get to the exciting part, which is the findings from the data, both from the poll attached to our flyers and from the paper at our tabling event. So our first question on the poll was, how much did students spend on textbooks in the fall 2024 semester? And this was just a way for us to kind of get a baseline of our community. And most students spent between $100 and $200, while some students paid up to $600 in one semester. The key takeaway that we got from this question and from our conversations was that regardless of the amount, every student felt like they were spending too much, especially on top of tuition. We then asked students what impact the price of textbooks has had on their lives, and almost 70% of students said that it had a big impact on their lives, which is a data point we will shortly qualify.
Our next few questions were more focused on OERs. We knew that we'd never heard of OERs before we started this job, and we wanted to know if that was similar to other students' experience as well. We found that 71% of the students we talked to had never heard of OERs before walking up to our table, and after we talked to them and explained the benefits, 95% of students said they were interested in using OERs. Even though most students said that they'd never heard of OERs before, we actually asked if they'd taken a class where they were given course materials that they weren't charged for. And 63% of students claimed to have taken a class like this. So this kind of goes to show that the conversation around OERs at our university is so minimal that students are using them without even knowing what they are.
And then at the end of the poll, we had an open-ended free response question where we asked, how has the cost of course materials negatively affected your university experience? And we got a lot of super interesting and passionate answers to our poll question on top of the answers that we got in our face-to-face conversations with students. Here are some of the key stories that we chose to share with you today. Students said that they had to restructure their budget, that the cost of textbooks was equivalent to 3 weeks of their grocery expenses, and that paying for textbooks on top of the price of tuition felt unreasonable. One student even felt like they had to pay more attention to which classes they picked because they wouldn't be able to afford certain textbooks. Because of the rising prices and inaccessibility of course materials, students are having to sacrifice the classes they want or need to take because of an inability to afford them. We believe that no student should have to make this kind of sacrifice for their education.
Students also talked about how they didn't want to add any additional financial stress on themselves or their parents by taking out extra loans. And they said that it's just not reasonable to cover those expenses. One student said that they're already in school and they can't be working full time just to cover the cost of textbooks. Other students also tried to find older PDF versions of the required books online, resulting in messed up pagination, incorrect citations, and confusing assignments because they didn't have the same resources as other students in their class. Additionally, a lot of students actually commented on how they felt like they were spending a lot of money on their textbooks and then not using them, or not using them enough to make it feel worth the cost. So in a lot of cases, and we know from personal experience as well, students feel like educators will require a book and then only use a small section while we're still required to pay for the entire book. So this is one of the reasons why we need to advocate for OERs, because they're adaptable to situations exactly like that. Last semester, I actually had firsthand experience of the frustration of paying for a textbook that we didn't use nearly enough to justify the cost. The course didn't label the textbook as essential when you signed up for it, which gave students a false sense of choice on whether or not they purchased the book. Unfortunately, because it was an inclusive access textbook, opting out wasn't really an option, as most of the course, including assignments, capstone projects, and exams, were all integrated inside the book. So after everyone purchased the book and used it for a few weeks, the professor had a lot of complaints about incorrect automatic grading and other technical issues within the book. And he decided to shift away from using the book, focus more on using OERs, which made the money that me and all my classmates put towards the book obsolete.
Okay, to wrap up our presentation, we just wanted to share our key takeaways and tips that we've learned from our journey, especially from a strictly student perspective. I'm sure we'll learn more as the spring semester continues and throughout the rest of our time at the library, but this is what we have found so far. Our first tip is to talk to students, because while we were passionate about and personally invested in this endeavor, it wasn't until we tabled and heard student stories that we got super invested in the importance of this project. We both believe that if students speak up and demand their voices to be heard, other people will join our fight for OER. This issue definitely needs to come from the ground up, especially in Utah, for any progress to be made.
Another takeaway was the benefit of collaborating and connecting with other people who are interested in using OERs. We learned a lot from making our own OER, but we learned even more from seeing how they were used in other contexts. So working with different departments around campus and developing OERs for their needs helped us see the full range of how open educational resources can be utilized, making us very excited to keep working on that.
And then our third takeaway is about cameras in H5P. Throughout this process, we really learned that educators and people at our university are more likely to use OER and Pressbooks when they are used in tandem with Canvas, providing an interactive element for students. Doing so makes OERs more palatable because they're in a familiar and helpful format. And this type of engagement shows both students and faculty the benefit of OER.
There's so many different OERs online that you can access, and we found that it was very beneficial to see what's worked for other people and see how other people have used OERs. So we believe that the OER community needs to be a community that collaborates and shares, and we've learned so much from other creators in our journey by embracing the somewhat overwhelming OER repositories. One thing that we really loved about working on this initiative is that the open educational world is so supportive, and authors of OERs make themselves very accessible for questions. We've made friends, been inspired, and truly feel like we're a part of this community working for the betterment of students and learners everywhere.
And then our fifth and final takeaway is that we need to be patient. This goes back to the political element at our university. We know that our goals are not everyone else's goals, but we are definitely hopeful that the future is moving towards more open educational opportunities.
Okay, just as we shared our initial goals at the beginning, we want to share our goals going forward. So we've applied for a seed grant, which we plan to use to run a campus-wide case study on the impacts of AI and OERs. For that, we plan to bring in professors and help them develop OERs for their courses by utilizing current AI tools, specifically Copilot. We also want to continue working with faculty outside of that project by helping them create open books for their courses and hopefully do a state-sponsored survey.
And then lastly, we hope to grow the OER community specifically in Utah, which we will be working towards by presenting the student perspective of OERs at the statewide Utah Academic Library Consortium webinar series next month. So we now want to open up our presentation to any questions. I think we finished a little early, so speak your mind.
I don't see any questions in the chat, so please speak up.
If anybody has a question and is not able to engage their mic, please send a message in chat.
Okay, Elise, I think, has some questions for you.
We were wondering if any of you guys have had students working with you, specifically on OERs. Yeah, if so, tell us in the chat and we'd love to hear from them and maybe collaborate on some projects.
This is John. I had a student recently working with me who was an intern from the University of Arizona's library school. I think he is now actually employed in a Midwestern library as an OER librarian. And what I had him working on was to take with some of what you were doing with your presentation, but I wanted him to go find the resources that faculty could use to find OER. So based on the panel that I was at just before this, where part of the reason I think faculty don't adopt OER is they can't find OER. And so we have something like 20 OER finding guides for subjects on our campus. So unfortunately, I think he's moved on to his librarian role, so he might not be able to collaborate that much.
Yeah, that's super interesting though. I think we're hopefully the OER initiative at the U get to that point where we even need students to help teachers find OER, because right now it's just teachers don't even know about OER. So yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, the university did set up a box folder for us to download some OERs as digital PDFs so that we can share them by discipline. So we were just talking recently about like setting up like an OER sampler email and sending it out and be like, check out some of these OERs if you want to see what they look like from different vendors, so that they would be right there. They could go and look at them. That would be one strategy. I know downloading them isn't great because they might be edited and changed later, but it's a way to get people to see what OERs look like. Let's see. Somebody said, I have students give feedback and edit with OER textbooks. Elise and Emma have given a lot of feedback, which has just been so helpful. Florida Virtual Campus, Elizabeth says, we had a state consortium of public universities and colleges developed a student advocate packet. Oh, that sounds interesting. Elizabeth, if you could share that with us by email. If you want to go to the last slide, Elise, so where my email is, that would be great. I haven't had any students working with me, but have done a survey for students. And we are, through our state library consortia, we are running a faculty and a student survey this semester. So we'll have a lot more data and possible people that we can reach out to. So they also talk here, Alicia is talking about also running a campaign for students. I know a lot of people start with what they can do for faculty. But starting with the students first was really interesting for me. It's a whole different approach. And I'm copying this chat, Elise and Emma, so that we have these comments and emails. Oh, here's Elizabeth's email. I will email you, Elizabeth, to get some information. Thank you. At Pomona, Pima Community College, we did something similar, created OER playbook on student engagement activities, and it was very fruitful. If you have a link, Megan, could you put the link in the chat? That would be really helpful. We're still in the process. So we started a lot of projects, and this has only been since the beginning of fall semester. And everything is kind of in progress. So I'm hoping by the end of this spring semester, we'll have some stuff that'll be published and available. Any other questions? Anybody want to jump in? Hey, we can give you 4 minutes back. Thank you so much for coming to our session. And I'm so glad that Elise and Emma have had a chance to present about the work that they're doing in OERs, considering they didn't know anything about OERs when they first started with us in September. This is really great.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening to us. And if anyone wants to reach out to us or has any questions, you can just email Donna. We'd love to hear about the work you're doing, especially with students. So yeah, awesome talking to you today.
Thank you, Elise and Emma.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to get all thank yous for them. Record it. Thanks a lot, John, for making sure we were up and running. And also, B. Schnell. What's your first name?
Brian.
Brian.
Brian
Thank you,
Schnell.
Brian.
Little German, I guess.
I'm Ziegenfuss, same thing.
Yeah, only a little bit though. Not a problem. My pleasure, ladies.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Have a good one, everyone.
Okay.